So anything that's communicated via this method from the Prophet ﷺ are binding until the day of Qiyamah. Right? So long as they identify certain legal consequences with specific legal causes. That's a technical definition there. So that's the second one. The third one is his role, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as a qadi or a judge. Now, think about this. This relies on what's being said to you from other people. So I might be a judge, you might be a judge. Your judgment is based on what you hear from people. Remember this difference. You're judging based on what people tell you. You can see there's less of a epistemological certainty in that, just not just naturally by what people are telling you, because you're judging based on their testimony. So you rely on people's claims, testimonies, capabilities, and then you give out appropriate punishment accordingly. So his sallallahu alaihi wasallam third role was that of a judge, and whenever he acted in such a capacity, right? So whenever acting in such a capacity, it is impermissible for anyone to act according to a rule issued by him as a judge without first seeking judicial intervention. What this basically means is that when the Prophet ﷺ spoke as a judge, as a qadi, you're not supposed to take that literally, because he spoke in response to something. And in a similar situation, when you find yourself in a situation where you need legal recourse to a judge, you're not supposed to just go to the Quran or the Hadith and take that. You're supposed to go to a judge who's trained in interpreting that message. So in acting as a judge, the Prophet ﷺ relied on evidence, courtroom evidence, that the litigants brought to him. And accordingly, he could be right or wrong, depending. Now, this is not the Prophet ﷺ being right or wrong. It depends on what the parties evidence to him. It depends on what they said to him. Because the Prophet ﷺ can only judge upon what's being presented before him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a hadith that's mentioned about this as well. So, rules to do with divorce, bankruptcy. You rely on evidence presented in court pursuant to the rules of evidence. So you're relying on evidence. Okay, so he also acted as a qadi, as a judge. So you have to know that when Prophet ﷺ said this, was he saying this as a messenger, as in direct revelation? He's just transmitting. Was he saying this as someone who's interpreting? In both of those cases, you have to follow it. Or was he, in this case, acting as a qadi or a judge? That requires you to then go to a qadi and a judge, because he was acting as a qadi and a judge. He was giving a judgment based on evidence that was presented to him. You can see how this is so fascinating, and it's very dangerous for me or anybody just to take a hadith and quite literally interpret it or act upon it. This is one of the important things you have to really, and they teach you this. If it's a good madrasa and you have a good teacher, they'll teach you to know this. You'll know straight away when you read a hadith what the Prophet is told, what capacity is he speaking about. The fourth one is the imam. Now, when we say imam, just to clarify, just in case there's any misunderstanding, we're not talking about an imam that leads the prayer. That's one type of imam. We're talking about the imam who is in charge of the community. And he is only bound by what Imam Qarafi says here, by the masalih al-am. What does that mean? These are his actions, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and statements in where he acted as a head of state, as someone with political authority of the community. So he's the head of the state, what we call the imam. These things are very important, by the way. I should interject myself and say that I am utterly disappointed when people use hadith without understanding what the Prophet ﷺ meant it, in what context he meant it. Okay, so these actions were undertaken based on the Prophet ﷺ's judgment regarding the welfare of his community, what was best for the ummah, and it's not binding upon the people after him. So if he made a particular judgment based on his role as the imam, it's not binding on those who came after him or who come after him. Okay, because it was what's best for the people of the time. Yes, you read it, it gives you a guide, You can theorize it. Of course, you do all of that. And that's why usul is so important. So if, for example, later on somebody comes and he becomes the imam and he's following the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may Allah bless us with leaders who truly embody the imamat of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what we really need as an ummah. So if they come and they see something which is for the well-being of the community, and it's furthered by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's policy as a imam, they can do that. But if they think that the community would be better served by a different policy, they can change that as well. So you can see where this is going. A lot of people say, oh, this imam, he did this, and the Prophet ﷺ did that, and how can you go against it? Well, you need to understand, my friends, in what capacity was he operating, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We do this all the time in everyday life. So we should see the Prophet ﷺ acting in just the same way, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Now, Imam Qarafi, just to carry on with my summary, I don't know if we'll have time to go into details. He gives lots of examples here in this text where the Malikis, the Shafi'is, and of course the Hanafis disagree on many things. Despite they all agree on the textual evidence of the Sunnah. So they all agree the Sunnah is our source of evidence. They all agree upon that. So by now it should be very, very clear. We're not talking about the textual evidence of the Sunnah. Okay. The difference is, as you can guess by now, or you should be on that path, is that they disagree as to when Prophet ﷺ said certain things or did certain things, was he acting as a mufti or was he acting as an imam, for example. Okay. So just to give you a summary, Imam Qarafi elsewhere says that as a general rule, this isn't always clear, but as a general rule, the Malikis and the Shafis, may Allah bless all their imams, they presume that the Prophet ﷺ's actions and statements are fatwas. So for them, they're fatwas. When he says something as a general way, whenever someone says something or does something, it's generally understood as a fatwa. In other words, it's binding. Because most of his actions were done in this capacity. That's the general reason that they gave. There are, of course, differences within school. Now, the important thing in Imam Qarafi's analysis is that in the way he breaks down different functions. Now listen to this very, very carefully. I'll repeat this twice for you if I need to. The important thing in Imam Qarafi's analysis is how he breaks down different functions, the four that we've discussed, into different epistemological categories of reasoning. How he breaks down different functions into different epistemological categories of reasoning. Muftis interpret revelation, the second of our four. Judges rely on courtroom evidence, number three. And the Imam, government, relies on what he sees around, data, empirical data regarding what's best for the community. Can you see? The first one, there's no debate. The Prophet ﷺ says something, it's taken. Now, this is based on what? This is based on revelation. It's otherworldly. So there's no dakhal in that. There's no interference in that. Okay. Muftis, of course, are interpreting revelation. So that's an epistemological stance based on revelation, something that's very strong. The judges rely on courtroom evidence, what's being presented in front of them. And the Imam, he's looking at the community he's responsible for. He's getting reports from his ministers, from the police, from the military, from different sections of the military, different groups, and he's making policy arrangements, just like governments today. Right? Good governments, they listen to what's happening in society, they do what's best for their community, or they should do what's best for their community. Okay. So that's kind of like an introduction to our topic. If you've understood all of that, you've understood everything I'm going to say, because it's very, very simple. There's nothing complicated here. Okay. So now is just some detail. I don't know how much time we have, so I'm not going to go into too much detail otherwise, but I thought I'd share that with you. What does this tell us? Well, you can see from what I've said already, without even going into proofs and the details, that when we hear something from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or when we read something from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have to be so careful, because this is adab with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have to say, well, in what capacity is he speaking? Is he speaking as a prophet? Is he speaking as an interpreter, mufti? Is he speaking as a judge or a qadi? Or is he speaking as a imam who's leading the political domain? And the jurists will tell you this. The fuqaha will tell you this. The muhaddithin will tell you this, because they say, well, this hadith, we've understood in this way because it was narrated on this particular incident and this companion acted upon it this way. So it's quite complex. But the fuqaha have given you a framework for understanding this. So if you've understood that from today's short lesson, then I think you've understood quite a bit. And you'll see how dangerous it is for laymen like me and women like many others to kind of simply take a hadith and go on Twitter or X or on social media or anywhere else and just kind of mention them as if like they are applied in every sense. Especially when it comes to ahkam, when it comes to rulings, we have to be especially careful. This is why training in fiqh, training in understanding hadith and language is very, very important. Otherwise, you misrepresent the words of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we seek Allah's protection. So when he says that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives you a futya means a legal opinion, then this is communication from Allah. This is the essence of Risala. This is the essence of Risala. He's giving you all of this. Okay. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives you a judicial ruling, something that's been given in a courtroom, this is different. So when he's giving you something in a courtroom, when he's given this in his role as a judge, this is different from Risala, the second category, and the first category, and also from legal opinions. Okay. Because this is all based on the evidence that's presented to him. This is what the Prophet warns us in the Hadith. He actually says this is mentioned by Imam Bukhari here. That the Prophet ﷺ says that you bring me your disputes, and it may very well be the case that one of you is a better advocate for his claim than his adversary. You're just better at arguing. Accordingly, whoever wins his claim, I award him something belonging to his brother. Let him not take it, for I'm giving him only a piece of halal. In other words, people might misrepresent in court, but that's based on the evidence that's presented to the judge. It's based on the ability of the person to argue their case. If they've lied to the Prophet ﷺ, or if they've lied to the judge, then Allah will deal with them on the day of judgment. And in the books of fiqh, we talk about this, about what happens when a person's rights are taken because the judge gives a wrong judgment or something. Of course, Allah, being the Ahkamul Hakimeen, will take justice for that on the day of Qiyamah. Okay. So when the Prophet ﷺ gives a legal opinion or acts as a Rasul, then you have to take it as it is. Yeah? Legal ruling. But when he gives something as a judge, then this is a different matter. Because in this case, he is not following Allah's command, that because the judge isn't transmitting something to him from Allah. Remember, in the first two, there's a transmission from Allah. One's direct transmission, one's interpretation. When it comes to a judge, right, this is a delegation that he has from Allah, and this is not a transmission from Allah. You have to understand these intricate differences. I'm just giving you like a summary of all of this, my friends, not into details. You have to study the entire course with me. Of course, when the Prophet ﷺ gives fatwa, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it might be that he said something, and the books of Hadith just list them all, and it might be that it became abrogated. That's why you need good jurists, because they know this Hadith is collected in Bukhari or Muslim or wherever. It's there as a data point, but no one acts upon the Hadith. There are many Hadiths that are authentic, absolutely authentic, but no one acts upon it because it's been, for example, it's been abrogated. The Prophet later on said something else, and it's clearly abrogated. So that's why you don't take Hadith literally. You need to know the rules of what's called naskh, and things become abrogated. And usually you know through certain methods that something's been abrogated. For example, it's common sense again. I might say something on Twitter or X or in Masjid about something, and then 3 weeks later, because the community has moved on or things have changed, I might say something different. So common sense tells you that what I said earlier no longer applies. Right? This is what a lot of stupid people do. They take something from the past and they make it sound like they mean it today when they've said something after that that might have changed. And people are entitled to change their views. We do it all the time. You'd have to be a really zealot, bigot, to kind of hold people to something that they've said in the past, and when they've changed their views. People can't change their views. And sometimes there's a maslaha. You hold a position, and then when society moves on, they are better prepared to accept that ruling. Then you come out with a new ruling. This is very common in even any society. This is why I always tell my students to study sociology and civilization and understand how human beings actually work, social anthropology, for example. And of course, this abrogation, when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, is only extended to his life. So nothing can be nothing can be abrogated after the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. Especially when it comes to his legal opinions, his fatwa. Because the law, the Sharia, became finally established with the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ might say something, and it specifies something that's in the Quran. So it might not even be abrogated. It might be saying this is a specific instance when this verse is to be understood. This is a long debate in a discussion in legal field between khas and am. So when Prophet says something, or a ruling is given, or a order is given, is it understood in a generic sense, or do we wait? Do we find is it understood generically until we find evidence that specifies it? This is a whole discussion that we have with students.